Welcome to the No Fear podcast and the No Fear live broadcast. I'm your host, Tony Lauer. If you're into mindset training, performance psychology, personal development, you'll dig this new format. No Fear Live is a unique broadcast, and it's different from the No Fear podcast. We decided to go live because we wanted to create the opportunity to interact with people like you all over the world, where anyone can log in and ask questions, and in some cases, you may even get invited into the show. The great thing about the live broadcast is that it's much more personal for the listener. That's you. Remember, self-defense isn't always about a confrontation with someone else. The first and most important fight is winning the one inside your head. Dude, I am back with my good friend, Mr. Marcus Aurelius Anderson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm fantastic, man. Thanks for having me on again, Coach. I always look forward to these, and I always get a lot out of them.
Whenever I say Aurelius, I want to go to battle with you. I want to fucking stick a spear in somebody.
Me too.
Yeah, dude. I have a whole different show lined up, and I'm hopefully going to ask you some questions that we've never asked you before, because you do a lot of podcasts and you have your own podcast. But why don't we do this for people who don't know you, and what's going on here? Let me go to my comments here. Okay. Hey guys, remember, just some quick not housekeeping, but logistics. If you are logging in from anywhere in the world, tell us where you're from, say hi to us. At the end of the show, towards the end of the show, we'll answer any questions you have for Marcus or myself on anything that we talk about or other things. Marcus, like me, is a lifelong martial artist. He also, like me, loves the topic of fear and comes about it in a different way. I'm going to do a little pre-brief into you and our relationship, and I'll let you, for people who don't know who you are, do your little elevator speech. I'm trapped in an elevator with you. You tell me your story. But I invited Marcus to our camp. It was the first camp after the pandemic started to go crazy. We co-taught some stuff. He has his own presentation, which is fantastic. If you don't have his book, The Gift of Adversity, is it on audio yet, man? Do you have an audio?
It is. It's on Audible, yes.
Okay. Did you do it?
I did. I'm not going to let somebody else read my story. I
fucking hate listening to other authors, and it really makes a difference when it is your story. But go check that out. We'll come back to that more before. But we had a blast, man. We really, it was almost like we'd worked together before when we did this, and just evidence that I am a little taller than you there. I did out-angle you. I think did my hair, right? But Marcus has a fascination with fear and managing fear. And comes at it differently than I. So there's a real complementary energy, as you'll discover during the talk. But I want to the questions I have in store for you really are more about you and not about your products and services and your mission and all that stuff. But we're stuck in an elevator, and you're going to do a 5-minute explanation to everybody who's going to be listening. Tell them who you are, what you do.
Yeah, and thank you again for having me on.
Of course.
I'm a TEDx speaker, best-selling author of the book, The Gift of Adversity, international keynote speaker, just got back from Portugal last week. I'm speaking with Steve Sims in LA next month, speaking in Miami, September, executive coach, leadership coach, and the podcast is called Octa Non Verba, and then the apparel brand will be releasing soon. And Tony was nice enough to be on Octa Non Verba as well. And as he said, when I was down there speaking, it just seemed to flow so easily. I had a whole lot of stuff in mind, but then Tony primed the audience and myself so well with the subject matter that it was just sort of a flow, and it very much complements one another. Tony's influenced me since I was a young martial artist. And the fact that my wife says that he's a better speaker than I am is a huge indication of his knowledge of breadth and depth of knowing fear, the spear system, and overcoming those things.
That's amazing. Okay, we can end the show right now. Thanks for
It's a wrap. I'll
that was
see
it.
you.
That's a wrap. I'm just going to leave it with that testimonial from your wife. Um, the okay, so very very cool. Tell people without getting graphic because I don't want to friggin' run outside and heave because I'm not good with this stuff. Um, the gift of diversity because it wouldn't do this show or any show justice if people didn't understand that journey from the industry from the injury and what that taught you. So why don't you kind of like high level take everyone through that.
Yeah, I joined the military at 38. I just had a divorce, and close male role model of mine, my great uncle, had passed away. He was in special forces, and I realized that this was my opportunity to join if I was going to join the military. Enlisted at 38 and was in the light infantry. In 2012, while preparing to deploy to go to Afghanistan, I ruptured a disc in my neck, and it paralyzed me from the neck down. During the surgery that followed, I died on the table twice. And when I woke up in the ICU, the surgeons say the good news is you get to live to tell the tale. The bad news is this is what you're left with. So at 40 years old, I'm broke, divorced, bedridden, and paralyzed, trying to figure out what the hell do I do with my life now? I'd given everything to this thing, and it was ripped away from me. And so for a lot of people now, they find themselves in these kind of positions. What I had to do was just sit with the adversity, sit with the wound, sit with the hardship, and look at it and figure out, what does this mean? A lot of times we think adversity is this big thing, which it is, but the only meaning that it has is the meaning that we attach to it. So for me, the meaning that I had to attach to it was genuine, no bullshit gratitude. Grateful that I wasn't in Afghanistan when it happened. Grateful that my team wasn't injured if it had been in a hot zone. Grateful that there wasn't a helicopter that had to pull me out, because those people would have been in harm's way. And once I had that real, genuine gratitude, I started, about 2 weeks later, started getting a little bit of feeling back in my fingers. And it wasn't a lot, but it was a beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a part of the slow year and a half of physical and occupational therapy. And then you get out and it's like, now what do I do? I can't go back to school and be a chiropractor. I still got neuropathy in my hands and feet. And I did what Robert Greene wrote a book around that time called Mastery. And he says, when you don't know where to begin, go back to the beginning. So I went back to your work. I went back to the martial arts. I went back to the philosophy. And that allowed me to get my first executive coaching client, my first speaking event. It led to me being forced to write the book. And if that hadn't happened, then you and I wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
It's an insane story, an amazing story, and it's weird because I visualize it, and it's bizarre because I know how my tolerance for pain, my things that I've accomplished and done, and I wonder if I would have the strength if I were that injured to persevere. I mean, that's because I've had chronic pain for years, and there's days you don't want to move, So it's an amazing place that you went in your mind, and like you said, a year and a half to get out. But now, I mean, this is many years ago, but you're running, you're moving, you're traveling. Uh, and it's amazing. One of the things that I don't share a lot of people's stuff. Most of the stuff I share gets me banned.
Me
but
too.
but I share a lot of your stuff because people don't realize, and I'm trying to remember it because I just read this the other day. Uh, it was something about when there's what we perceive as an accident in our lives, and it's right up your alley, and I meant to share it with you, and I was just on the run. There's this idea that some sort of accident happens, an accident meaning this meeting didn't happen. There could have been a car accident. It could have been you missed your flight. Um, in our language, from of course, the whole fear loop. The longer I stay in the fear loop, the less I see the opportunity, and the harder it is for adversity to become something positive, for resilience to create the scar tissue, the lessons, and stuff like that. What was your insight, Marcus? Like, when did you realize Like the title of the book, like if I said, hey, let's kick around some titles of the book. Shit happens, but you're okay. Fuck pain. How about the gift of adversity? Like that's a great title, right? You're not going to change that.
Right.
Do you remember that insight, right? Like why that title or why that thought came to you, and because there had to have been a period, and we all do this, and this is something like when I'm coaching people in our programs outside of self-defense is I tell people life's a roller coaster ride. It's normal for you to stub your toe and go, fuck, I'm so stupid. Where's my awareness? Oh, my toe. But the longer you do that, you're not fucking doing anything positive. So how do you, it's creating that self-awareness that says, okay, good. Or like to quote Jocko, good,
Yeah.
right? And then move on. So what was you're doing all this stuff, you're not lying there paralyzed, your fingertips going, holy shit, my fingertips, that means I can type and write a book and I'll do it. Like you didn't have, like there was a long journey there, but what was the insight of, oh my God, adversity is a gift?
Yeah, the insight is lots of times we try to get away from it, and when I had no other choice but to face it and look at the wound while it was open and say, okay, I have nothing else to do. I mean, I can either watch Netflix or just sit here and be pissed off. And I went through the 5 stages. I went through denial. I went through anger. I went through bargaining. I went through depression. And then I would cycle back through them again before I finally got to acceptance. But once I got to that place of saying, okay, this is the reality. I don't have to like it, but it is the truth.
Mm.
If this is the case, how can I maintain any kind of lifestyle? Because I was suicidal, but I couldn't act on it. So if this is the place and this is what I have to do, what can I do? What can I look at this as? Where's the opportunity within this? And the reality is it's very hard for us to see the gift of adversity in the moment. Like when you're being attacked and you're trying to survive, you're not thinking, wow, I'm going to think about this in half an hour and say, wow, that was great that he made me work on my situational awareness. But if we can have the hindsight, at least at some point, that gives us an opportunity to win. And where I found the gift in it was that to me, gratitude is very easy to be grateful when things are going well. We can cherry pick everything. Oh, I'm healthy. Oh, the house is good. Oh, money is good. My family's fine, whatever. But that's when it's easy. But when you get punched in the face, and when you and I were talking in 2020, when things like went sideways, that's when you have to have it the most. And for most of us, if we can find that opportunity in the hardship, no matter what happens, now you're fucking bulletproof. Because the good stuff will reinforce it.
Let's dig into this because I think I've shared this with you before, both personally and in on your podcast. I struggle with gratitude, and maybe it's just language, maybe it's just semantics, but I understand the science behind it. I understand, like everyone, like when things are, you're out, it's a beautiful day. Things are, this contract just landed. Your wife gave you a kiss. The kids are doing good. The dogs didn't bark. And you're outside with your cup of coffee in the morning and you go, I did it. I moved us to California. My dream that I had as a kid. Look at this. Business is good. Look at, and then, I could step on a thorn and go, oh shit, and burn myself. And I go, fuck, life sucks. Like it's schizo. So when you're, I'm sure you've met other people like this. What guidance would you have for me, for the audience, on steps of developing a gratitude practice? Because what you said is so profound. It's easy to be, write down your 3 things you're grateful for in the morning, at night, because for the most part, and I don't know if all of you heard what Marcus said. He was suicidal but couldn't act on it. Right? Think about that. You're paralyzed in a bed. You want to kill yourself, and you're going, man, I can't even fucking kill myself. Right? Like that's insane focus and self-awareness, and in that almost what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like a cruel irony.
Yeah.
You find enlightenment. You go, well, okay, how do we do that? Anyways, That was insane. I just got goosebumps thinking about that for you. But so yeah, you know, how do you help people develop that gratitude practice when things aren't going well?
And I love that you say that because I do know people that have a gratitude journal, but it's almost like a kid with a Christmas list. It's like that's not the same.
Right, right. That's great.
When people are like most people have bullshit gratitude, it's fake, or they have guilt but they disguise it as gratitude.
I'm grateful that you said that, by the way.
I couldn't be more grateful that you were grateful for it. The
Right,
idea of this, lots of times we gaslight ourselves into feeling gratitude, but that's really
right.
guilt. So now what are you doing?
Mm,
If you had this first world problem and then you feel guilty that you had this first world problem, now you're not practicing gratitude. You're making yourself feel guilty. And then here's what happens. How many people do we know that have an incredible business? They did all these successful things and they're like, they just kind of gloss over it or they can't feel any kind of happiness for it. They just want to move on to the next thing. Lots of times those are the people that don't understand what real gratitude is. They feel guilty about it. And now they try to just push past it. So you're reinforcing the wrong thing. To me, and the way that I ask people to look at it is say, gratitude is when you can be happy that something happened and you get zero benefit from it.
mm.
I'm happy for you winning. I'm happy for you succeeding. I'm happy for you doing the work that you're doing at an even higher level now. Not that I'm getting benefit from it. I mean, I'm on your show. I guess maybe I do. Maybe I'm selfish. But the idea is I love seeing great people doing great things because there's plenty of people out there that are not great, that are doing a lot of shit to us that
Hmm.
that's what we're working to try to stop now. All these things that we see. The idea is if I can be grateful that something happened if it didn't help me. So for me, the idea was if I was in Afghanistan and my guys were hurt, because for every one man that's injured, it takes two to pull him to safety. How much guilt would I have had on top of everything else?
Mm.
How much aggravation would I have had? How badly would I have felt about that, even though it was completely out of my control? And like you said, that idea of enlightenment, we actually get enlightenment through higher levels of adversity, in my opinion, much like with your spear training, right? With the suit, right? The full contact. Like that's what we're trying to give. You're not
Mm.
teaching them to pull the punch. You're teaching them to give everything so that this person has a fighting chance. And for most people, what people think of as trauma is actually just enlightenment.
It's interesting there because my brain is flying now because it's because enlightenment has such a woo woo connotation, but really it's like you're in the dark about something and somebody turns a flashlight on and you've enlightened the moment. And
Yes.
so if you get on using just a self-defense metaphor for a moment, you think that managing true violence is step one, step two, step three. And if you get really good at this and then you get your ass kicked, that can scar you, it can fuck you up, or you can be enlightened. And it's not that you're wiser than everybody, but for where you were in the dark, you now
Yes.
can see and you know what your journey and your path is. So, part two to that, you just enlightened me. So, part two to this, Marcus, uh, is part of, and I'm answering the question as I say it, but I just want your guidance and insight on this. Um, if the typical reaction of somebody who experiences something they don't want to happen is to have a fearful reaction, to be, emotionally, psychologically reactive, to curse. Why does this happen to me?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying first, and you have permission to go, why does this fucking happen to me? And then say it again as if Yoda was there or your coach was there and says, yes, why does this happen to you? Change the connotation. Because if you can dig into that, that's your enlightenment. And maybe then you get to say, I'm grateful that happened to me because I wouldn't have known that not moving my head means I get punched in the face. Why do I always get punched in the face? I need to learn pre-contact cues and how to slip.
Absolutely. Sometimes the true gift of adversity is not to put ourselves in the same situation repeatedly with the expectation of it being different. That's the definition of insanity.
Hmm. Okay. Um, interesting stuff. Do you, aside from your live courses and training and your book, do you have a course yet? Do you have an
I,
online
I
course?
I don't. I've had a lot of people ask me about it. I'm trying to figure out what that would look like. The thing that I want to make sure is that I'm able to give the material in a way that's very, and I think you're doing a great job of it. I think that maybe I just need to let go of that
Compliment.
and commit and do it, because I see a lot of people that are putting stuff out there that's not great, but yet a lot of people are buying it in hopes that it will do the work for them. What you're teaching them is like showing them the
Right.
actual tools that they can use and they can apply it in real time, and it helps them. I think that may be something I need to do next. I've had people
Yeah.
ask me,
I mean,
especially after the Audible book. I didn't think the Audible book would be that big of a deal, and I get more responses from that. And then what happens? People buy the book after that. It's like, I'm an
right.
idiot. Why did I wait so long?
Yeah. No, you want to. I mean, if you people need coaches, and anyone listening to this, if you a lot of people don't realize how many coaches that I have for little things, and it's not that I'm not smart enough to figure it out. It's just that my bandwidth is so preoccupied with other stuff. I know I won't
Yeah,
do it if I don't hire somebody to go, okay, come here. You're doing your like I've been working on my whole life. I've got two or three people that work on my body for me
yep.
or with me, you know. So yeah, I would encourage you, man. And I'll talk to you after or another day just about some ideas for a course, because I think there's a lot of people that can't get to your live talks. There's a lot of people that'll buy your book, your audio book, but they'll go, okay, that's great, but where do I start? And I think
And I do executive coaching for like CEOs, leaders, executives, but I know that there are people that maybe aren't at that level or don't have that price point in
sure,
mind. So you're right. Having something online is
yeah,
should be the
yeah,
next step for me.
it's a good idea. Okay, let's completely pivot this and let's talk, because a lot of people who are listening to No Fear, martial artists, combatives, defensive tactics, uh, obviously my background, so most people listen like that. I think there's a lot of people on also who are interested in the psychology, the fear stuff. So maybe we get to that. But let's talk martial arts. When did you start? What year was it? Do you remember?
1983, I was 11. Started in traditional Taekwondo,
I'm so
and
old.
right, I was gonna say I'm not young. And that was like I'm in Oklahoma in the Midwest, so there was either karate or Taekwondo. And as you remember, in 1988 was when the Seoul Korea Olympics had Taekwondo in it, so that was kind of big. But the
Right,
thing that I always could get was Black Belt Magazine or Inside Kung Fu, and I would see you, and I would see Panic Attacks,
right.
advertised in the back, and all the great stuff that you had even then. And like I said, you really took the piss out of a lot of this stuff. This idea of thinking I'm going to get into a fight and bow to the person first, and we're both going to like have this
Right, right.
fighting stance and agree to these terms. It's like it doesn't happen like that.
That's crazy. Okay. Um, did you start because you were bullied, or did you just start because you were fascinated with it? What was your connection to martial arts?
Just like with you, Bruce Lee, seeing Bruce
Okay.
Lee and Chuck Norris, my dad loved those things, and it just seemed like a natural progression. Honestly, it was like that was kind of what I wanted to do. And my parents were divorced when I was younger, and when I went to live with my father full time, he was like, "Hey, we'll get you in the class," and it's just like anything else. You apply it often enough, and eventually the technique kind of just comes. And learning more about that just helped me in every aspect of my life. Even though like I'm not going to do a jumping, flying sidekick to defend myself or somebody else, probably the self control, the perseverance, the humility, the work ethic, the discipline, like all that stuff has served me in every arena that I enter, and every other martial art that I've practiced from there out as well.
Dig it, dig it. Did you ever compete, or did you just do it
I
for self
I
defense?
did like Taekwondo nationals. I was third in the nation in '88, I believe, at like a, but nothing really. I mean, you would do some fighting or you would do certain things for when you're sparring, but nothing professionally, nothing to the point of like to the level that you were teaching people. So, but I
Yeah,
learned a hell of a lot in the process.
yeah, yeah. Um, Experience in the street. You ever get your ass kicked?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Where you was did you where you grew up? Was it a kind of a rough area or suburbia? Like I grew up in suburbia, and I the only violence and shit I got in trouble was because I was hanging out with idiots or went to a place, but it wasn't. I didn't grow up in a rough area.
Yeah, I didn't grow up in a rough area. I did find myself trying to help my friends that were in kind of rough areas, and that's what got me into situations where, again, I didn't understand that that the enemy has a vote in the fight as well, and lots of times they want to win as well. But the
Sure.
interesting thing is, once you get your ass kicked, like for the first time, it doesn't always hurt you, but it scares the shit out of you because it's not something you expected. But it's not that bad lots of times if you're lucky enough to at least be able to survive. And this is, again, in the Midwest. So once you got punched and got knocked down, and they're not going to just jump on you and keep going. It was like that was sort of the good old boy version of I won, you lost, now let's be buddies type thing.
Yeah, but I think that was also possibly a little bit of where you were, but I also think that hang on a second. The sorry, man,
You're good.
my dogs aren't supposed to be out where they'll start freaking out and barking. I won't be able to hear you. Um, the I might have to close my door. Well, I should just close this down.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you, guys. Um,
I remember on our podcast when you were on my show, you were saying, how I was grateful that you got beat up the way that you did at a young age because that's what
right,
made you start
right,
really
right.
looking into this stuff. Not that I was happy you got beat up.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard you say. But what I was about to say when you said like so back in the day, if that didn't happen with me, but it was around. Like if you got in a fight with somebody in high school,
Hmm.
you guys kind of like looked at each other after and was like, yeah, okay, good, and maybe you became friends because that violence was total ego, and then when the fight was over, the ego, like a balloon, deflated. Um, but I also think it was a sign of the times. I think that the type of violence is so brazen now, and people are so much more dangerous because of video games, because of culture, because of all the shit that's going on,
Yeah.
with the world. Are um, Besides Bruce Lee, did you have any type of martial art or combat sport hero, or was he the guy?
For me, he was the guy. I mean, my dad enjoyed Chuck Norris, and we know back then the Chopsaki Vengeance movies in the 80s and early 90s, there was a lot of stuff out there. But that's what really kind of helped me. And then the UFC, went to
Right?
the UFC in 93. And then I went to my first Hoist Gracie seminar in 1995 in Texas because here's
Were
the
you
USA
at Were
champ.
you at the UFC in '93 in
No, I
Denver?
wasn't. I
Or you
wasn't. You
watched?
were, though.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't at the first one. I got to see it on pay per view like everybody else did, and I was like, "How is this skinny dude in a gi kicking everybody's ass?"
Right.
And that was kind of the beginning. Although you were already ahead of the curve with that as well, seeing it coming down the pike.
It was funny because I was in the elevator, so I was there writing for three magazines, one in USA, one in the UK, one in Australia, and so I was interviewing all the fighters, and I was in the elevator, and Zane Fraser, one of the guys in the first,
Yeah.
he's like sitting there, and they're standing there in the elevator, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're Tony Blauer," and I'm like, I didn't expect anyone to recognize me, right? Like,
Hmm.
um, but he had, because my panic attack tapes had come out in '87 or '86,
Yep.
and he just looked at me. He said, "I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for your panic attack tapes."
Wow.
You know, he said, like those things. We looked at that shit and we were like, "Holy shit!" And so it took their training to that next level. So that was kind of a cool little anecdote there. Um, are you still? I mean, your career and your business is taking you in a whole different direction. Uh, Obviously you're still very fit, and you work out all the time. Are you still doing the martial stuff?
I
And
do with a few guys that I with my neck injury and stuff. I'm not doing full contact
sure,
sparring or like heavy rolling, but there's guys that I've trusted that I've known for years that I'm not doing it like 3 times a week at all,
right,
but I still get together with them to keep the blade sharp. And then frankly, I'm doing a lot more weapons training with the blade and the firearm, doing that consistently, whether it be dry fire or just going out to the range to get the reps in.
Nice.
I'm I'm seeing the evolution. Bruce Lee's protege Guru Nasanto says that the body you have when you're 30 is not the body you're going to have when you're 40, and we see in today's day and age, there's a lot of violence that's out there that's very fast, and if you're not prepared, if you don't have the capacity or the skill set or the weapons to be able to deploy them in real time to stop a bad guy who has weapons, then all you have are good intentions, and we all know what the road to hell is paved with. So yeah, that's what I'm focusing on a lot right now.
Nice. Are you training with anyone for your weapon deployment stuff?
The person I'm training with is remotely. His name's Ian Strembeck. He's a Ruin Nation. If you see a lot of his stuff, he says no one's coming to save you. That's his T-shirts. Former Marine. He was in every position on the fire team, and then he's got his own stuff that he's doing now, doing a lot of that. He's got a remote system where he's sending me workouts 4 times a week, and then
Nice.
live fire stuff, and that keeps you honest. And it's very much about practical stuff, whether it be retention, whether it be single hand drawing, going from the blade into the pistol, putting it together, making it make sense. I don't think that it's interesting. You see people at the range and they think that they're going to have time to deploy the weapon and press it out and get on the sights. And we train that way, but there have to be other, just like the panic attack kind of idea, or when that person's approaching me, if I can't get 90, if I can't at least spear them and get to the weapon as you've written about and talked about, it doesn't do me any good if I can't get to it and deploy it without it being taken
Sure.
away from me, or I hurt myself in the process,
Yeah. No, a lot of people think that, and I fucking hate this. I mention it all the time. Like anytime there's something on the news, like everyone who carries, posts, that's why I carry, that's why I carry, that's why I carry, that's why I carry, play stupid games, win, stupid prizes. And I hate all those comments because people don't realize like the chaos that happens, even if it's for 1.5 seconds. And you could think you're training for it, but if you're training at the range as your hands are up here and then a beeper goes off and you're just doing that, like we call this awareness, consent, and preparation, ACP model. And it's just like, I know I'm doing a drill. I've consented to do a drill. I've got all my kit together. I've press checked. I've made sure the range is clear, range is hot. Like that doesn't happen in a real violent encounter. And so, the most important thing that I always tell everybody, and I write about it as much as I can, more and more, the ability to manage fear is inarguably the single most important, like, internal skill you can have, because, as you know, the mind navigates the body. And I don't know if you ever heard me talk about this, that the sudden fear spike that puts you in the fear loop is like a double feed or a stovepipe in your gun, as a metaphor. And that means that I go to move, I go, oh, and I can't fire, it's inoperable. And so if you want neuromuscular communication, if you want even the spear to fire, if you want that palm strike, elbow kick, whatever to fire, you need to have the fear spike needs to be fueling the whole nervous system.
Yes.
So it's a neat metaphor as we dig deeper into that.
And I love that. And like you said, you have to weaponize that flinch. Most encounters with a handgun, I remember reading 10 years ago that they were saying it's between 0 and 6 feet, but we see more and more often that there's actually entanglement. It's usually within, like, their hands are on you, and now you have to be able to deploy the weapon without shooting yourself, without shooting a civilian around you, without, shooting your hand. There's so many things that are in there. And again, this idea that just, you talk about physicality, it does no good for me to have a pistol if I'm not able to do burpees or stress shoot or do something else to have the physical ability to deploy the weapon with cardiovascular stress, with the adrenaline dump, in the fear spike, in real time, right now. Like, it's the rest of it is just conjecture, and it may make me feel good, but it's not going to really help me when I need it.
And there's a different level. I just posted about this on yesterday's newsletter. There's an art and a science to creating scenarios. And what most people do is they call it scenario training, but it's not scenario training. It's a pseudo scripted play where what they're practicing is winning this storyline. And it's almost like do you remember the old Jim Carrey in Living Color skit? You
Yeah.
attacked me wrong. No, you're supposed to be here. You're supposed to do that, right?
Yeah.
So anybody listening to this, if you're interested in this, and I didn't know we were going to talk about this because I didn't know where this conversation would go. We've got a course called Evidence-Based Scenario Trainer, and Marcus, if you happen to be free and you want to come to California and do the training, come in and be my guest in it. But it's in October 19th and 20th, just before our camp. So it's and it really explains and teaches people this whole idea of everything you said is true about the entanglement, but what's still missing from the classic stress inoculation is a jack-in-the-box moment. And what we mean by the jack-in-the-box moment is, you all remember Jack in the Box, right? You got the clown music, right? And I always make this joke that if you're cranking the box and you've got your Three Stooges finger ready to go to finger jab the clown will still pop up before you can finger jab it. In other words, action is always faster than reaction. Yes. So you could be indexing your gun, going, oh, fuck, you're at a gas station, shit's about to go down, but you're waiting, and people might be arguing, no, you don't wait if you don't know what you do, right? Because everything is fluid, right? And you're waiting for, am I 100% sure? I'm 99% sure here, right? Like, because you don't want to jump the gun, pardon the pun. And I'm not talking about guys like a gunfight's already started. There's a lot of video out there where you're going shit, and there's the refractory delay between stimulus and response. Yes. That's the area that we need to educate people on, because we can all work on and get good at the gymnastics, Marcus. Flinch, draw, push away, spear, grab the guy, drop an elbow, draw, stab. And I see a lot of people working on bob dummies and doing all sorts of fast shit like that, but it's still ACP, awareness, consent, preparation. It's not an ambush. So
yeah, when we're in a fight and when we realize we're one step behind in the fight, we're actually two or three. And like you said, because of the fear loop, because it takes us so long to figure it out. And like you said, the pre-attack cues, like if you see somebody walking around and they're looking around, I mean, if you don't have situational awareness, I love you always make that connection between self-awareness giving you the capacity to have situational awareness.
Right.
And we see today, like, because of this thing, it used to be an insult to say, hey, you've got the attention of a goldfish, 8 seconds. Right. But today it's a compliment, because people are so despondent. People are so, they're detached from everything, and they are the perfect victim oftentimes because they're more concerned about what somebody said on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. It's like, get somewhere where you're safe, at least, if you're going to do that. But again, it's hard to tell somebody until they've experienced it.
Yeah, there's a real need to explain to people what we call the timeline of violence, and understanding, because there's a lot of training around, what's the best way to describe this? Or in our timeline, I'll pop it up right here. Like, there's a lot of training around the D3 part, which is like, here's how you get a knife out. Here's how you're going to get a gun out. Here's where you shoot the guy. You don't shoot your hand here. And we can turn it into empty hand stuff. Mm-hmm. There's very little training around the moral, ethical, legal responsibility to defuse.
Right.
And there's almost no training for the average person in situational awareness. Yes. There's a couple of good books, Left to Bang, right? There's a couple other, Combat Hunter. There's books there, but they're not written in a way, in my opinion, where you, like, the average person can turn that into a drill skill that they can apply to their personal defense. And I may be wrong, and maybe I've overlooked parts of it or whatever, but I meet so many people where I'll go back to something, and I'm glad you referenced it, Marcus. The the important part of what we're showing people is that your self-awareness is what decodes and decides what it's going to do with the situational awareness. In other words, what's going on around you is happening without your permission.
Yep.
And you can see it and be frozen like deer in headlights. You can see it and run. You can see it and fight, right? Quoting the classic, and I don't enjoy the language of run, hide, fight. But those are all reactions, and there are things we observe post-mortem after the event, right?
Right.
I want people to be responsive because what they've done is they've thought about the scenario in advance. And that's what I mean by scenario training is a true art and science. That you need it to be realistic, you need it to be relevant, and people confuse that. They consider anything that's realistic relevant, right? I could say, hey, let's sword fight. It's realistic, but we're not samurais in the 1700s and 1800s.
Yep.
Now, the contrarian will go, well, I heard of this story with this guy grabbed a sword and killed some. Yes, that could happen,
Sure.
but it's not really relevant. The training is realistic. Can you find the intersection, like a Venn diagram, right, of that realistic, relevant, and then intelligently make it rigorous? And then suddenly you've got, everything there. It's neat. I hope you can make that course. I'll have Elisa put the link up for people online, just so you the scenario course. And if people come to our scenario course, the camp is free, so it's 4 days of training with us. But I would love you there to do that, to experience it. And of course, like you, I've got, not to the degree you have, but I have my own neck issues, so I'm not getting smashed in the head anytime, avoiding that as I can. I had a couple other questions that I want to talk about. Here's an interesting one, because obviously you've alluded to this a couple of times. You wanted to be a chiropractor, but you couldn't. You wanted to be in the military, and then that happened, and now you're like a speaker and a coach and a writer. And is there something else? This is just, again, because you've been on the show before and just getting people to know. Is there something else that, like if this wasn't happening, or you went, I'm done with this, that you go, I want to do this, right? Is there like I love music and I love playing guitar. I'd love to be a rock star, but I'm not. I'm a self-defense instructor. Is there something that you do in your off time, or something that you love that you go, man, if I wasn't doing this, I would definitely pursue that?
There's really not. I started playing the guitar when I was younger, and I still I can try to play the guitar now, but I can barely get C, D, and G to actually ring out properly. What I found is
Because of
just
your fingers, or just because you're not a good guitarist?
I was a pretty decent guitarist. It's because of my fingers. It's hard for me to really feel to
Right.
get the chords in there. But what I'm kind of doing what I love, and like you said, it's this Venn diagram of my experience, the things I've learned from other people, from martial arts, from people like yourself, and then put it together. That's what seemed to help with the executive coaching. I had a person that I was teaching him the blade. He's an older gentleman, had a he had all these properties, and he had a lot of this wealth, and he would say, I'm learning more from you about my business from a lesson with the blade with you than I am from this executive coach. I was like, what the hell is an executive coach? And he's like, I'm
Right.
paying him all this money. I was like, and so I was a smart ass. I was like, well, just write me a check. He did. And he slides it over and he says, so how do you want to do this? And I was like, well, just keep doing what we're doing. And I'll give the lessons for free, because I was charging like $100 a private lesson. And that just led to other things. So the stuff that I enjoy, that I love, I'm doing, being outside, training, working out, reading, writing, trying to do physical martial skills. And then, now that I'm married, being able to have that time again, having, It's nice when you can have an adventure like in Portugal, and you're mixing it with business, and you're
Yeah,
mixing it with all these things, kind of like with what you're doing with your work, where you're able to help all these people. And this is kind of what you think about, like even when you're getting out of the shower, you're like, hey, I've got this idea for the next
sure.
part of the book, or this scenario, what if I was attacked right now, whatever it is. That to me is what I found a lot of the great, not that I'm great, but the people that we see that are really great in their field, they're always continually not like this obsessive thing where they can't get any peace and they're anxiety ridden, but more of it just naturally kind of comes to that, just like with you coming back to your breath and meditation, or whatever that may be. So
Speaking of breath and meditation, I mean, it's great that I want to come back to that, but because I rudely went into something because my brain just I love meditation and breathing. Um, and I want to talk about that, but I want to kind of honor what you just shared for a second because it made me think also. So it's crazy. I interrupted myself interrupting you. The uh, I've mentioned this before, but you remember the speaker Wayne Dyer?
yes.
Okay, so he had I don't know when or where I heard this from, if it was a talk or a book, but he had these three questions. If you didn't know where you lived and you could live anywhere in the world, where would you want to live and why aren't you there? If you didn't know what you did and you could do anything in the world, why aren't you doing that? And if you didn't know your age and you looked in the mirror, how old did you think you were? And like the Venn diagram, if you can find some intersection with that,
Yeah.
certainly in this day and age, the two most important thing is your purpose. Are you doing what you love? Because I really believe that you won't look your age, right? Because you're never I gotta go to work, like
Yeah.
if and then because of the speed of the internet and things like StreamYard and Zoom and stuff like that, you can live anywhere you want in the world. But like for me, I always wanted to live in California. You know the story. You've heard it 100 times. I've talked about it on your podcast. Uh, my mom saying, "Hey, what are you going to do? You're going into the family business. You're going to be a police officer. You're going to be a veterinarian. Mom, I'm going to be a famous martial artist like Bruce Lee. School is not going to be important to me." Okay, okay, dear. We'll talk about this when you're older, right? Um, and it's neat, and I wish everybody could find the courage to kind of pursue that in their own way. And it doesn't have to be your full-time gig. I mean, ideally it would be, but the reality is you might have to, um, do this job you don't really love, but you're writing your music at night or whatever. But you got to find that thing where those, two of those three elements, if not three of those elements, but you don't look your age and you're doing what you love. And I don't know if you're living I know you love where you live, but I don't know if it's at a point where you can go, hey, let's live in Hawaii for a couple of years and see how that goes. You could just move because your business is portable and your business is in your brain. So that's what I wanted to say when after that, but I interrupted myself interrupting you to say, talk about a little bit about your breathing and meditation. And I'll kick it off by saying, I don't do a lot, but I try to hit it twice a day before I get out of bed. I do 5, 10, sometimes 20 minutes, depending on how my sleep was, but usually, and it's just deliberate breathing. And what I discovered, and I've talked about this before in the show, that, intentionally breathing and doing various types of breathing, from longer breath holds to Brock's breathing to more rapid fire like Wim Hof stuff, and blending all that actually improves your aerobic capacity. And when I had my neck injury and I stopped training everything, what kept me from friggin' going over the edge was breathing. And then when I started training again, my aerobic capacity hadn't faltered, and I didn't train for a couple of years. I was like, how is it that I'm not out of breath doing this stuff? And it was because I had never done so much breathing. So everyone out there, you could do breathing exercises in traffic. Keep you calm, but you're also breathing. So there's little, we call them tactical snacks. How can you do these like mini little tactical snacks? But talk a little bit about your breathing meditation practice and experience.
Well, I've read a lot of Zen, Taoism, things like that, and traditional martial arts usually have some component of breathing or some component of meditation. I understood it and I practiced it, but it didn't become that important to me until, again, lying in that bed, unable to move for 4 months. I couldn't control anything, and my mind was like going out of control. The only thing I could control was my breathing. So
Mhm.
back then I knew box breathing. Back then I knew the deep, 6 count in, hold, six
Right.
count out, and then that was it. But that for me gave me the capacity to keep my mind from going from the sympathetic fight or flight place to, okay, let's just look at the reality of what's going on here. And it didn't solve my problems, but it never made them worse,
Right.
ever. It always gave me some ability to ground. And then even now, whether it be in the morning before everybody else is up, or even before this, being able to have that opportunity. The main thing is, I think a lot of people think that you have to have like robes and shave your head like me and have incense and Hare Krishnas dancing around you and stuff,
Right.
and you do. If you don't, then you're not meditating
Right.
and you're
Right.
lying to yourself and you're a fraud. I'm just kidding. The idea is, when people meditate, and I know, like, I love Joe Dispenza stuff, I love Wim Hof stuff, but for most people, the best thing they can do is just decide on a breath pattern, whether it be box breathing, they breathe in for 4, they hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold that for 4, whatever it is. But just find some sort of breathing pattern that makes you focus on that, and then just let everything else go. Like, just don't try to control your thoughts, because you're going to have thoughts about a song from 1997 that comes in your head, and an argument that you had before, or what you should be getting at the store, or what your next appointment is. Just let that happen and then come back to your breath. Just forget about all that stuff and allow your mind to, it's like a warm bath just kind of going over your brain, and just kind of let that stuff go. And even 10 minutes of that gives you a little bit of capacity to detach. When I had Robert Greene on the show, he was saying that every morning he actually meditates for 45 minutes, and he's been doing it that way every day for 13 years.
Wild.
And he is literally to the point where he said that he's trying to, like, he'll take a koan or whatever and try to imagine that, and see where the initiation of the thought is, and then stop it right there. I think that that's a good practice in some ways, but for me, I have enough stuff that I have to, like, use my cognitive
Right.
capacity for. So my goal is just to use it as ability to just step back. So like you said, if you can do it twice a day, do it in the morning to set the intention, do it in the afternoon as like a secondary reset. And now it allows you to really attack that day with more urgency, as opposed to thinking, okay, what's next? And that's the way I do it. And for my clients, if they have hard times, there's parachute breathing, just real simple, where you just take a real quick through your nose, and then
Mhm.
very elongated out the mouth, and you're trying to get that vagal tone down. You're trying to slow down from sympathetic to parasympathetic. And if you're on a Zoom call, you can take 3 of the, you can like hit mute, turn off the camera and take 3 of those, and then come back to the call and you're good. Or walking, like you said, to your vehicle, get in the vehicle, take some breaths. You're in traffic and you're pissed off because you're stuck on the 405. Do some parachute breathing. Don't do it while you're moving, obviously, but lots of times it's not moving, so you got plenty of time to work on it.
Yeah. Yeah. All of these, this is all great advice. If those of you listening to the show, if you're not doing any, I call it intentional breathing, because you all breathe unintentionally. Because if you didn't, you'd be dead. And, but there's so much magic in it. Even if you start with the idea that if you deliberately control your breath, meaning you can breathe for 4, 4, 4, 4, or 5, 5, 5, or 6, 6, 6, or 4 in, 6 hold, 8 out. There's all these myriad options. You can make up your own shit. What you're doing is you're working on your aerobic capacity in the same way like you can do a concentration curl, right? You can just focus on your bicep and we know that that works. A lot of us, especially martial artists, until I had my injury, I never thought about breathing on purpose because I was training 7 days a week. My aerobic capacity was through the roof. I was sparring every one of my students. I had 30 privates a week. I had group classes. So I thought I was peaked as far as what I could do, as far as my aerobic system could be. But you can do more. And the other value that I tell people who are new to it is to what Marcus said is don't try to control your thoughts, just observe them. And if you will get distracted, but then catch yourself being distracted and go, I'm supposed to be thinking about my breath, inhale, exhale, or counting or whatever.
Yep.
And there's a silver lining in that, because what that's teaching you to do is fucking focus on what you're supposed to do now, which is a big problem we all have, right?
Yeah.
Many times a day, do you stop doing what you're supposed to do, check your phone for messages, look at Instagram for a second, and then catch yourself going, what the fuck am I doing? And meditation will help you control that impulse. It'll develop that mental strength.
And back to that too. When I'm talking to executives, like you said, this happens to everybody, or CEOs or leaders, I have them use a power list. This is what Andy Frisella talks about, and it's like these are the 2 or 3 things that you can get done today that will actually move the needle. And lots of times I make them program either in their phone or on their schedule, put in meditation. There's that 10-minute block. Like put it in there, and you'll notice that once it's there, it makes you bring your attention to the fact that, oh, I need to meditate this morning. Oh, I need to meditate this afternoon. Or you were talking about, there's vertical breathing. There's all these things that we happen that if we're under stress, we notice how our body's responding at that point. It's like, is this really what I need to be doing before I had this phone call or before I had this conversation? Probably not. In today's day and age, a lot of the battlefield that we're on is not as easily defined, so we don't really know. And because we find that people that over respond or overreact, or the people that aren't able to control those things,
Right.
it's because they haven't had fear inoculation like the way you teach them. They've never been in a real situation where they have to fight. And so they assume that everything will escalate to this point. And what are they afraid of? They're afraid that escalation will end in something that they don't have an answer for, which is violence, which is to defend themselves. And so that just becomes this anxiety-ridden loop that just keeps going on all the time. But learning martial arts, learning what you're talking about, pushing yourself physically, creating some sort of need for resilience before you need it, gives you a fighting chance if something actually does happen.
They did. And also, everything Marcus just said there is literal, but it's also metaphoric, because the fight doesn't have to be a physical fight. And very often, it's actually part of the intro on the podcast is often the fight is in our mind, something we're imagining. And a lot of times it's relationship bullshit or shit going on in the world.
Yeah.
And we've magnified it and amplified it because we don't know how to critically think. Yes. So two things as we wrap up. One is, how do you change your relationship with fear? Because if you change your relationship with fear, you are out of the fear loop, and now you are a more productive individual. To do that, you need to improve your self-awareness. Studying fear improves your self-awareness. That gives you more critical thinking skills and the insight. And every time I talk to you, I come back to this because I don't work on it enough myself, is I spend too long when bad shit happens. As quickly as I pivot, I still spend too long on it. I need to remind myself, as if you were there, going, like, oh, fuck, this just happened, Marcus. You go, it's the gift of adversity. What can you learn here? Mm-hmm. And so, and I'm not being corny or trying to blow smoke up your ass. I forget that. So guys, I'm being totally transparent right now. I've got a wicked temper. I'm incredibly emotional. I'm only trying to save the world, so I got a lot of pressure on me. And as fast as I can pivot, I can still do a better job at that by remembering that there is a lesson, and this will happen again if I don't learn that lesson. It may not be exact, but it's because everyone listening to this has said stuff like, this shit always fucking happens to me. We've all muttered that phrase, or a variation of it. And that's part of the lesson there. So if you want to get deeper insights into this, go get this. book. I'm actually going to get the audio book a little bit later today because I
Awesome.
love. I'm so excited that I didn't know that it had come out, and I've got obviously the actual book, but I don't even have time to read anymore, and I do a lot of walks. So
Fair. Yeah.
so get this. Anything you want to say about the book or the audio book or the the podcast? You're on all the usual channels, right? And you
Yeah,
get
you
some
can.
badass guests.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had incredible guests like yourself on the podcast, Octa Nonverba podcast. You can go find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. The website's marcusaureliusanderson.com. And then the apparel will be out, and my next book, which is actually called Octa Nonverba, will be out later on this year. The goal is to try to make sure that I can dovetail these in a way that actually makes sense for other people. And I also want people to just everything that we're talking about. Octanon verba is Latin for actions, not words. So it does me no good to go to a seminar with Tony and not try to participate or not actually try to bring it back and put it into play. I when you and I talk, we always talk about adversity and fear, and they're always hand in hand because they
Sure.
work together. And I always say that the way that we conduct ourselves in the face of adversity and fear dictates how we do everything else in our lives. So if things are going great and we're a great person, that's fine. But when the shit hits the fan, now what do you got? And then more importantly, what does that do? That teaches the people around us. So if I fall apart at the first indication of anything that may be fearful for me, what am I teaching my team, or what am I teaching my wife? What am I teaching the people that I lead? It's the same thing with us. There's always somebody that sees what we're doing. There's always somebody that's influenced by our behavior. So, is this what I want to keep doing? How is this going to work out when I use myself as the example and I'm teaching my child or my wife, hey, if something looks like it's dangerous, I just want you to fall apart and just give up and be a pacifist and hope that this person is going to give you some sort of mercy. Because in today's day and age, if you act like a victim and like if you act like a prey in front of a predator, it will absolutely happen to you that way. You have to have the situational awareness. You have to have your shoulders back. You have to at least look around to where you're not an easy target, whether that be physically or emotionally. And that gives you the ability to have a chance when it happens.
Yeah, I think I was just making notes here on. I want to meditate a little bit more on our enlightenment talk earlier because it's
Absolutely.
again, it's such a woo woo term, and um, but we could have like lots of little enlightenments throughout the day or our life. Um, and dude, as always, you know, it's it's uh, it's always a deep conversation. It's subtle, but that is your way and your nature. Um, the uh, I got this. This is wonderful from Michael. Uh, wonderful, wonderful. Um, Appreciate you. Michael's always on. He's from the other side of the world, Spain, right? You're Michael. I think you're out of Spain. I can't remember now. We were just messaging on LinkedIn.
Thank you,
Um,
Michael.
uh, yeah, um, dude. Anything that you'd want to share that we haven't shared? And like you're always welcome back. If something comes up
Oh, I
when
love it.
when the new book comes out, let's get you on again. Talk about
Yeah,
that
absolutely. The
insights.
I think that if you're already listening to this podcast and you're already listening to the right people, if you're listening to Tony, if you're following his material, if you're training with him, if you're buying his products, I think you're on the right track. I think that anybody that's listening to this needs to go out and just be very honest with themselves and say, no bullshit. Where am I lacking? What am I afraid of? And then unpack why you are afraid. Tony made that comment about how that even he, like the master of fear management, still has to go through the fear loop, still has to go through the 5 stages of acceptance to get there. And if you're in business or if you're in a fight, the sooner that you can get to reality than your opponent, that's a tactical advantage for you. The sooner that you can accept it. But when you're in denial or when you're angry or when you're playing the victim, man, the commonality there is you. So be very honest about what that looks like for you. And Tony was mentioning how, hey, I was able to do these things because of this journey that I took. But I want you to know I had no other choice. I didn't want to do this. There's no
Mhm.
way at 40 years old that I would have sat back and looked at my life. I would have just tried to do what everybody else is doing, which is go along to get along and live a life of quiet desperation. But when you have no other choice, the choice is simple. So the idea is to hopefully get in front of it before something happens. But if you're not able to do that, then just understand that this is going to make you stronger. It's going to make you smarter, hopefully. And if nothing else, again, ask yourself, why am I putting myself in the same position, whether it be a relationship, whether it be a job, whether it be physically, like I can't stay on this diet or I'm not staying consistent with my working out. Unpack that, because that's going to give you a lot more information. I learned more from just sitting with my pain and understanding that it was teaching me than I ever would have had I listened to a podcast or read a book. And frankly, chances are you already know what to do. You don't need somebody else to tell you. Look at the thing that you're avoiding, and that's usually where your answer is. The last time we spoke, I said that the answer that we seek is found in the adversity that we're avoiding. So look into that and be honest, and you'll be surprised at what you find.
Amazing. It's a wonderful place to finish. The secret is always the secret to our personal success and growth uh, is understanding ourselves, guys. That self-awareness is that superpower. I appreciate that. Liam just posted something here that I appreciate. Thank you, Liam. I'm not going to put it up on the screen because I don't want to detract from what Marcus said there, but he's just talking about the spear system and how much it's helped him and his family. So I appreciate that. Dude, as always, great to see you again. Great to have you on. When you're in LA, if you're in for a couple of days, hit me up and we'll see if we can link up.
I know last time I just kind of popped in when I went and saw Steve, and
Yeah.
I was like, shit, I way too far up there. So
Yeah. So let me know. I mean, we'll see if we can get together.
yeah, I love it.
And so we'll wrap this up, guys. Thank you as always. Please share it. It's on we're streaming live on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And tag your friends if you think this is something important for them to listen to. And much appreciated. Stand by.